Hey, welcome to Truth and Reality. I am Ashley, and this podcast is dedicated to just that, talking about the ups, the downs, the in-betweens of life, and how God and faith fits into all of it. I am back with Melissa. Hey!
Hey, good to be back. We're in studio. We're live.
We're live, real life together, which is great.
No screens. It feels great just to be sitting across from you. I like this.
There's a little more laughter, too. It's harder to stay on task.
You're not wrong. A lot of adjusting, just making sure we're sitting right, all the things, right? Versus a screen where you can so we're here.
That's good.
Can't wait. Let's chat some more.
Yeah, so the last podcast we talked about waiting, and we're going to continue with that. We talked about when we are in a waiting season, how we want to wait, and how do we do that. And both of us have found that in waiting seasons, when we so badly want it to be done and over, we miss out on a lot of life. Mm-hmm. And God's inviting us to partner with Him, to learn how to entwine our hearts with Him, like we talked about in Psalm 25. And in that process, there's a huge refining and realignment that we're able to experience with the Lord. And it's been beautiful. It's been hard, but it's also been beautiful.
Yep. I think you can hold both. I think that's what we've realized, right? And trying not to be wasting the time and waiting, right?
Yes.
And I think you and I touched on that last time. It's just being content, right? And not making that waiting moment the focal point of everything. Mm-hmm. Can we shelf the waiting and put it there and still continue loving God, serving Him, enjoying life, right? You and I are waiting for things in the season of life. We've waited for things in the past. Can we continue enjoying it? And how do we find rest in that time of waiting?
Yeah, because that waiting time to do it with God and say, God, you are God, I am not. I'm going to lay down my expectations. It takes trust.
Yep.
And in that place of building trust with God, there is this element of rest that He's inviting us into. Mm-hmm. So what does that even look like? What do we mean when we say rest? We're not laying flat. It's not resting and taking a semi-break from life like a vacation. What does rest look like in a waiting season?
Well, I think if you think about rest just in this time that we're living in, it's hard to do, right? Everything feels busy. Kids, motherhood, right? Whatever season you're in, whether it's work, travel, it's the busyness of life. So I think first and foremost, you have to be intentional in your rest. Like you said, it's not laying down flat. I think for me, rest looks like not striving, right? Not necessarily striving for the answer or striving to be. I think there was a season that I was just serving so much that I was neglecting what was at home, neglecting, being more present with my kids, and I was just striving. So I think rest for me looks in different dimensions of being careful what I say yes to. Mm-hmm. Rest is resting my mind, and you and I have talked about this, is like sometimes just in the morning, I'm writing every care, every worry that I have, and saying, God, I give it to you. Rest my mind of the running, of the mind just going crazy, resting in Him and knowing, even though I don't have the answer, it's coming, even if the timing feels off, right? So I think there's so many levels of rest that we can experience, I think my biggest battle is probably my mind. Mm-hmm. And I think in the same regard, letting my body rest, right? And letting it not to strive to do all the things, right? And I think different seasons bring different things. And you and I have talked about that. Seasons, we both have a lot of kids. So it's like, how do we allocate and make that time to rest? Because I think when you do rest, you're able to pour out better, right? Mm-hmm. You're able to be better mom, better friend. When I rest, I can hear from God more in a deeper measure. What does rest look like for you in the season, Ash?
Well, yeah, I agree with you. I like how you said, hey, it starts physically, because sometimes when I quiet my body and I take care of it, then I'm allowed to see, internally, this isn't resting.
Yep.
Like my mind is stirring. So then there's an emotional rest. Mm-hmm. And then I think there's a spiritual rest. Yep. And I think you touched on all of them. And sometimes we hop right to the spiritual rest, but sometimes it takes us slowing our schedule, slowing our pace, being careful what we say yes to, so that we have space to really be like, there's a lot of thoughts going on in my mind of worry or anxiety or fear. And then we're like, that's because spiritually, I'm not resting in the truth of what God said, that He's with me, that He'll guide me, that He'll take care of me. So I think they're all connected no matter where you start at it. Yep. And I think for me, rest has come from knowing, one, in a waiting season, God's with me.
Yep.
I'm not alone. He didn't abandon me, nor will he abandon me now.
Yep.
He's brought me this far, and he's going to walk me through. So I think going back and seeing all of the different times in the Bible where he's been faithful, that's been very helpful to me. So you look through all the different stories, even the Israelites, they wandered for years.
They did.
He continued to be faithful to them,
Yep.
even when they weren't. I think going back and looking at the faithfulness of God in my own life, that builds the foundation in the waiting season. Okay, he's been faithful over and over and over, just like you said. Okay, I can stand in this waiting season knowing he's not going to leave me.
Yep.
He's going to stay with me. He's going to guide me. He's going to walk me through. So then whatever I'm waiting for, I know the way to that is actually through with God. And I think that took a while. And it took those different rests of like resting my body to realize, oh, when I lay down, my mind just goes crazy. Or I'm not controlling my thoughts. And then I was learning to like, how do we take our thoughts captive in that waiting season? Because there's a tendency to be like, I'll never get there. He won't do it. I can't do it. There's so many limiting beliefs.
It's never going to happen, right? Like, it would have already happened by now if it was going to. I mean, I think you and I have had conversations about certain things that we expected to happen and haven't happened.
Yeah.
And there's part of it, like, I've just kind of given up, like, it's not going to happen. You know? And then it's like, no, God, you're in it. Your timing just looks different than mine.
Yeah. And I think that's that part of wrapping your heart with God's. And it's not us doing it. It's us inviting God into those spaces of saying, like, man, parenting by myself is a challenge. I'm feeling weary. Lord, how do you want to come in and parent with me? Like, how can you help me through this? What do I need to know about my kid? What do I need to know about my own self-parenting? Help me through this. It's inviting into those spaces. And in that process, I think there's an undoing of the lies I believe about myself or God. And there's that, like, reinstating truth. So it's like, oh, you have fully equipped me. Yes, you have. You will fully equip me. I might not be strong, but you are strong in me, and you're going to be my source and my strength. So there's things when you wait, when you sit, and when you do give rest to your body, your soul, and your spirit, there's this element of like, oh, now I'm resting in God, like it talks in Psalm 91. Right?
Yep. I think I can remember specifically when you were saying that, like probably 2 years ago, I was at such a level of striving. I don't know why. I mean, I've tried to unpack it and try and figure out why, but it's like I was at such a level of striving, of like serving in the church, striving even to be a great parent, striving to, volunteer and do all these things. And I literally became physically ill, like full of worry, full of doubt. And I thought, like, God, where are you in the midst of this? And he said, I didn't tell you to do all those things. Like, he's like, you have to pull back and find that level of rest and find that level of balance. Because I was like, having panic attacks and worrying, and I'm thinking like, God, how could you allow this? And he was like, I didn't say to do it all. And I think we just have to be so mindful in whatever season we're in of what we say yes to. The pace of my life right now looks really different than a lot of other people's, but I know it's the season I need to be in. It's not forever. It's slow. It's peaceful. There's times we're striving and running and doing all the things, but I think it's just so good to keep a check-in with God. Like, this is where we're at. Is this good for you? Is this a season, God? I invite you into the parts where maybe I'm not resting and I need to, but do better at it. I think it's a daily surrender in my mind. Of resting in him, resting and trusting in his presence, that he will carry me. He will sustain me as a mom. He will carry me and sustain me even in a season of loneliness, right? And you and I have experienced and talked about loneliness, and even people probably listening, right? That God is in that. And we can rest in him, that it might just be a season that you're feeling lonely. He's in it. And I remember even saying to him, God, strengthen me even in my loneliness and be with me and carry me through this season to let me rest in you and trust that there's good to come.
Yeah. And I like how you're talking about sometimes we are striving to do and all of these things to maybe escape the loneliness. I don't know, sometimes I do that. 100%. Or maybe to earn value or worth. I thought for a long time in my life that I had to do so many things to be somebody, to have something. And God likes to flip that.
Right.
You already are. You be so that, and you have because of who Jesus is, and now go and do. And I think that element for me of resting has helped too. Because I think when we get, personally for me, when I get in seasons where I'm worried or I'm anxious or I'm in a waiting season, I too am like, I'm going to do all of this stuff and push it through and get to the next season. And God's like, no.
Yeah.
That's not how we're gonna. That's how, we can do that.
Well, I was gonna say God allowed me to do it, but then when it came down, I'm like, why am I falling apart? He's like, I didn't say to do this.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to say this about Abraham, because I am not to judge a father of our faith. But he also did that. God gave him a promise. It was hard to wait for the promise, so he went and had a child, and that's Ishmael, and that created strife in the family. God still blessed Ishmael, though, but Isaac was the promise. And so it's so interesting because we can do that. If God gives us a promise, I've done that too, where I'm like, okay, well, it's not coming, so I'm going to go create it and make it. But it's not what God intended.
Right.
And so that striving to do, he's like, no. How about you come back here in this place and be? And be with me, and be in the season you're in. And from the being in that season, you take one day and one step at a time with God, and he walks you to whatever that next season is. Yeah. That's my experience of the waiting season, where I was like, quick, I can't do this for 3 days, let alone 3 months. Now here I am 4 years later.
Right.
And it didn't come because I rushed it. Well, sometimes I tried to, but it came because I was like, okay, God, what do you want to do today? What do you want to do today? Yep. And each step along the way, meeting and inviting him in, led me to where he has me now, which is a different season than I wanted to get out of before. Yep. It's that daily being. And I think in our culture, it's really hard to be because our culture is very do to become somebody. And God's like, hey, you already are somebody, and you're pretty awesome. I created you, right? And you're with me, and because of me, now let's go and do something. But it's a different motivation, but that's what's brought rest as well for me.
But I like what you said, because I think there's probably people listening or even watching this that it's like you're just boiling it down to simple things of just like be in the day-to-day, God. You know, like boiling it down to just simple things, not such a big striving of rest about everything. It's like, God, be in today, be in parenting, be in my job, you know, be in my thoughts. It's like just trusting him with the day-to-day. So then it doesn't feel like you and I were talking about, you know, 3 years. It's like, no, you're just in today. You know, the Bible says, like, tomorrow has enough worries for in itself. Yeah. I think we live in such a time, everything's fast, and keeps getting faster. And it's like, you're going to have to be intentional with your rest. I think you and I think, you know, we've had to learn to be intentional with our rest. And it's hard, you know, I mean, everything screams at you, and it's like just being mindful of like, it's even a weekly, like, God, help me put into my schedule what I'm supposed to do this week. And if there's something, God, that's too much, like, help me in that, you know, not easy, you know, and I think being mindful of it.
And I love that. It's coming back to the beginning where we said we're resting when we're listening to what our bodies are saying to us. Like if we need to physically rest, we're taking our schedules and saying, God, what do you want to do with my plans just today or this week? And then we're also resting, saying like, God, you're God and you're good. And I trust that you're good. And if you're not there and you're listening to this, that's the first place to start is being real with God and saying, God, I don't know if you're good. Yeah. You don't feel good right now. Can you tell me the truth? Who are you? So I would encourage you to start there and to reach out to somebody and say, hey, can you walk this with me? Right? Let's close with Matthew 11:28.
One of my favorite verses. It says, are you weary, carrying a heavy burden? Truly, you know, come to me. I will refresh your life. For I am your oasis. Like I think of Oasis and I think of such a beautiful place. Simply join your life with mine and learn the ways, and you will discover that I am gentle. I love that he says that. I am humble, easy to please. You will find refreshment and rest in me. For all that I require for you will be pleasant and easy to bear. I love that. Easy to bear, even when life doesn't feel like it. Easy to bear.
Well, I think that's the essence of resting our bodies, our spirits, and our souls, is bringing all of those cares, those heavy burdens, and saying, dropping them. I almost see like a physical like load of like dropping them at Jesus's feet. Right. And it doesn't negate that we don't have to go through and walk out our lives, but it's saying, God, you're responsible. I'm obedient. What do you want me to do? How do you want to walk through this with me? And
I think this is a good first step, as she was saying. If you are struggling and not sure what to do, look up Matthew 11:28. 28. Read it over your life. Say, God, I'm weary. God, I carry this heavy burden, but I'm giving it to you. God, come to me. God, would you refresh me today? And like speak these words like over your life. And I think you're going to see such a beautiful transformation.
Yeah. He, there, I want to do one more.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny. I go, there, as we're talking, we're being real here.
Yeah.
It was interesting because in Psalm 25, well, maybe it's Psalm 139, basically, I'm not going to waste our time searching it up. It says, take everything back to God. Leave it at his feet. If there's any plan or path that I'm walking on, lead me back to your glorious everlasting way. The path that brings me back to you, he will never disappoint. And so that's the point that I'm trying to make, is even if you bring all this stuff, even if you're questioning, which we all do, we doubt, we question, we bring it to God, keep bringing it back to God, even if it's doubt, even if it's fear, even if it's faith. Bring it back to God and say, help me. He won't disappoint.
No, he won't. No, not at all.
Okay, we're going to keep the conversation going. Follow us on social media at Peace Runs Deep, and you can find us on Spotify, Truth and Reality.